right now. All right. Hi, everyone. So again, I'm just going to go back and share my screen, and then we will get started on that. Okay, I think it's sharing the wrong screen. Yes. I'm sorry, Haley, do you think that you could pull it up or... Also, you're muted right now.
Let me try to pull it up on the laptop again, and I'll be right back.
Yes. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. I don't exactly know what's happening with Zoom right now. It's just lagging really badly whenever I try to share my screen, but not to worry, we will get that fixed. In the meantime, if you wanted to maybe pop in the chat or something like that, maybe something you're hoping to get out of today in terms of like learning something or any questions that you have, we're gonna have questions and answers at the end of the presentation, but you can go ahead and pop those in kind of whenever. Okay. Well, so I'm not exactly sure how this recording is going to end up looking because I can't see the slides on my end, but we will go through all of the content that we were going to cover, and I presume that you guys can see the slides at least. So feel free to stop us, ask any questions and stuff like that along the way. But to kind of just kick this off, so the goal today obviously is to learn how to make a compelling resume. So not just, the basics of a resume, but how to make it a good resume. And then someone actually also asked if we would be talking a little bit about cover letters. So we can talk a little bit about cover letters towards the end as well. But yeah, so to start off with, I'm here with Haley. So just to introduce both of us very briefly, I am a rising junior at the University of Michigan on a pre-med track studying neuroscience. And Haley, if you wanted to introduce yourself in the midst of these technical difficulties. You're muted.
Hi,
There you
I'm
go.
Haley. I am going to Barnard College of Columbia University. I will be a rising freshman, and I am also a prospective neuroscience major on the pre-med track.
Alrighty, so just to kind of kick this off, so we're both from General Intelligences, which is a nonprofit focused on educational inequality. And in terms of resources and stuff like that, if you guys still have questions after the presentation, I would recommend checking out our website. Should be pretty easy to find. If you just Google General Intelligences nonprofit, the website pops up. But yeah, without further ado, I think we'll get started on the contents of the presentation for today. So we are going to start with what is a good resume, basically the things to include in a resume, stuff like that. Also things to avoid, which is on the other side of that as well. Then after that, we're going to go into the anatomy of a resume. Actually, we're going to start with the anatomy of the resume, I believe. Which are the different sections basically of the resume. And then at the end, we will have time for questions and answers for anyone that, has any remaining questions, wants us to like maybe look at their stuff. I don't necessarily know that we'll be able to look at your resumes today, unfortunately, because of all these technical difficulties, but we will do our best to try to give you advice based on the information that you give us. So, Haley, if you wanted to maybe go into what is a good resume, so those slides, and then we can.
Right now in the chat, we are about to send 3 templates that are Google Docs templates. They are free and available, but it was just easier to send the links to you guys. So if you guys want to use any of those templates, all you have to do when you click on any of those links is 1, choose your favorite, and then 2, click file and then make a copy so that it shows up in your own drive and you're not like editing the general intelligence one. So yeah, those are your templates. The first part component of the resume, there's going to be like a spot that says your name and your address and your email and things like that. So that's like the basic information. That would be the first step, I would think, in completing your resume, because it's kind of the simplest. Those are all things you can come up with off the top of your head. Yeah.
Right, and then after that, we have skills, awards, and experiences. So for skills, that section, that's usually towards the bottom of your resume, or it could be at the top. It kind of does depend on the template, but it's going to be a small section basically where you can list off some things like, we'll give you some examples because maybe people might not know what skills are appropriate to add to a resume. So you can add things like soft skills, which are basically things like problem solving, critical thinking, adaptability, creativity, teamwork, stuff like that. But you can also add other skills. For example, Microsoft Office is a very big one. So that would be, you know, knowing how to use Excel, knowing how to use Microsoft Word, stuff like that. You can also add any type of certification. So actually a lot of different online websites right now, because of COVID and everything being online, are giving out some free certifications. So if you're interested in maybe obtaining one of those, for example, that would be a really good thing to do if you have some time. A lot of them are free. Some of them you have to pay for. I wouldn't recommend doing those. I think that you can find ones that are free. And sometimes there's something like $50, and that's very excessive. Obviously, especially for, you know, a high school student budget. In terms of other things that you can add to your resume, under skills specifically, you can also add any languages that you speak. So languages are a huge asset. Even if, for example, maybe like English isn't your first language, it's actually a really huge asset to know another language anyway. And that goes for any field, whether you're going into, you know, business or medicine or something like that. It's just a good thing to add just generally. And then let's see, for experience. So obviously high school students always ask, well, what can I put for experience? Because I may not have a lot of experience. Not everyone goes out and does things like internships or stuff over the summer. Not everyone has, you know, the opportunity to do that, right? Sometimes you have to be working a job, multiple jobs, stuff like that. So in those kinds of instances, that still counts as experience. Sales experience can teach you a lot of things. For example, like, you know, I worked at a cafe for a little bit, and it teaches you a lot of skills. It teaches you how to be organized, you know, time efficient, how to communicate well with people, work as part of a team. And you can really try to emphasize those different components, basically, when you're talking about your experience. But basically, what you want to put for each experience that you have is you want to list out your company name / your job title. So you want to also change the text font and everything to match the rest of your resume and stuff like that. But you do kind of want to emphasize that line in some way, whether that be like bolding it or italicizing it or something like that. And basically for time period, so some people have a little bit of a maybe different ways of doing this. Some people, they'll say you should do month and year. Some people, they'll say just do year. Some people, they'll say do month, day, year. So it kind of just depends on the room that you have. I would say, like, for me personally, what I use is, I think month and year makes the most sense for me. in terms of the space and stuff like that. But, you know, feel free to adapt that if you feel like you need to or it's relevant to do so. In terms of the description, that's obviously the most important part, and we're going to go into that a little bit more because a lot of people struggle with what exactly to put. So obviously it's very simple to say maybe something like, I worked at Kohl's or something for X hours for this many weeks or months or whatever, right? And I answered phone calls and I checked people out. But that kind of description, while it does show what you were doing, it doesn't necessarily talk about the skills and stuff that you've acquired from doing that job. So it would be considered maybe like not the best way to describe the position for a resume. You could describe it that way if someone asked you about it, maybe when you had an interview or stuff like that. Maybe if they asked about what did your job kind of entail, you can talk about it then. But in terms of other things to add to that description, you want to definitely add if it taught you any sort of like leadership skills, if maybe you progressed in your position in any way. So for example, maybe you started off as like just a regular employee and then you became maybe like a shift manager or something like that. That would be something to elaborate upon and talk about. You also can add just stuff like, you know, how you worked as a team in that kind of environment. A lot of jobs are pretty inclusive of having you in a team anyway. So it's good to talk about those skills and stuff like that and how you are able to work well in a team. And then, let's see. If you want to go into education, Haley.
So the other component of a resume would be education, which can be either high school or college, depending on what age you are. It can also be different certifications that you have. We already talked about that a little bit. So the free trainings online right now because of COVID are a really great opportunity to help yourself in your future resume. So if you're still going to high school, you can put like the month and the month and the year that you entered high school to present. Same with college. If you're still going, you can still put it in and say that you're still going. But it is super important to add your education because it just shows like what you've done and where you've gone and things like that. So. The next component is awards, which not everyone has these. It's awards or honors. And sometimes if you're coming from a small school or you weren't involved in any programs that gave out any awards, it can be kind of hard to fill this in. You don't have to have anything for this section. A lot of people don't because, like I said, you come from a small school or you come from a background or a different program that just doesn't have that kind of resource. Feel free to literally just delete the section. If you really can't come up with anything, it's your resume. You can make it what you want out of it. So just delete the section.
I think we have something in the chat. Do you have any links for online free certifications offered? Yes, I will look for some while Haley continues and I will put them in the chat.
Okay. So there are good things to do in a resume and not so great things to do in a resume. So for the do's, like it says on the screen right now, you do want to make it visually appealing. Nobody wants to look at your resume and just be bored by the amount of text and things like that on the screen. An employer would much rather look at something that was visually appealing. So your resume also should not be the same every job that you apply to because every job is different. So the different skills that you pick up are going to apply differently to different jobs. So cater your resume specifically to the job that you are applying for. So like we were saying in the experience category, mentioning things that would be very specific to the job you're applying for, make sure that you're doing that with every resume that you have. using strong action verbs, things that catch attention. And like I already said, add relevant skills to the job posting. So things that you have that would make you a good fit for this position that you're applying for. And important keywords. And then you have the obvious don'ts. Don't make it too bland or too long. No employer wants to read a 4-page resume. You can condense that to fit to the job. Don't use the same resume for all your applications. Don't use paragraphs. It's too much text. No employer wants to read that. Don't forget to add skills or only list Microsoft Office. You have more skills than Microsoft Office. If it's leadership, if it is anything else, you have more skills than that, and it's important for an employer to see that. Yeah, and don't forget keywords. You want to make it relevant to what you're doing.
Absolutely. So for the next thing, I've put also the link in the description, or not the description, in the chat, sorry. And that's an example basically of a bad resume. So if you look at the one at the top of the link, it should also be on the slides, but just in case you can't see them. If we take a look at this resume that we have here that I sent in the chat, are there any things that kind of stand out to people as maybe being bad or something that they can improve on? You can drop it in the chat. You can send me like a private chat if you don't feel comfortable talking about it that way. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Really, any way we can go about this. I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to look at it. Okay, so I already got a couple of messages, which is great. Thank you guys. So for example, one of the things that you guys pointed out is they say my many years of experience and skills, and that's not very specific. That is a great point to mention, and also something that we'll talk about a little bit more right now. So whenever you talk about things on your resume, you want to be probably as specific as you can possibly be, whether that be quantifying it with numbers. And if you can't do it with numbers, you can still be somewhat specific. So for example, this person in their resume, they could have said, for example, they've done something for like 2 years or 6 months or something like that. And even that is, telling us more about him and like their experience and stuff like that than just saying many years of experience and skills. You also want to be specific about the types of skills. So not all skills are just going to be under one umbrella. Some skills are a little bit also more relevant for the job that you're applying for, right? So you really want to kind of emphasize those skills over the other skills. Obviously, it's good to have a bunch of skills, in kind of your tool belt, proverbially. But like if you had to, in a limited amount of space, you're going to just want to emphasize those skills. So another thing someone pointed out is that the qualification summary is very general and it's not very specific or detailed. That's another important thing to make note of. Again, you want to make it specific. You don't want someone to be able to look at your resume and say, this could be a resume for anyone. You want it to be something where you really show your assets, both as, a student or as an applicant or anything like that. You want to show what you specifically contributed. So I think a lot of people also maybe make the mistake of, obviously you can attribute the success of maybe like a company or like a club or something like that. You can attribute it to yourself if you had like a role, like a leadership role or something like that. But even more broadly than that, you should also take ownership of the specific things that you did to make that happen. because a lot of times you could have just been someone that maybe, and the employer doesn't know you personally, right? So it's nothing personal. I'm not saying that any of you are like this, but the employer has no idea really. So you could really just be someone that maybe just showed up, had minimal commitment, and you just happened to be a part of a club that just did really well. So you really want to be able to elaborate on your experiences and how you contributed to something growing. And I think that's very important. Another thing someone added is great time manager could be worded differently. So I'm sure as you guys read through this resume, this bad example of a resume, there are actually a lot of grammatical errors in there. And that really should stand out to you as something that is horrible and that you should try to avoid as much as possible. So a lot of people say maybe like, maybe English or grammar or stuff like that, maybe not their strong suit, right? So for those people, I will put this in the chat really quick. But it's really just like a website, but you can also make it a browser extension as well. And it's just called Grammarly. You guys have probably seen ads for this on YouTube at some point, but in case you haven't, this one's really pretty good at catching any sort of errors. Or maybe, for example, like I know a lot of people when they're kind of reviewing maybe a lot of writing that they have, they might miss something, even if they are good at English and stuff like that. So it's very important to have, first of all, someone else look it over, but also to have this kind of software, which is completely free. Might as well just have it look it over. It also gives you suggestions as well. For example, if you have something called passive language in there, it's going to encourage you to use, you know, like Haley mentioned, those like strong action verbs instead. And that's again something that you really want to know and recognize. Really, honestly, the take home message of all of this is someone is going to be looking at your resume, and no matter how many hours you put into it and stuff like that, the truth of the matter is that that person is going to be looking at it for maybe a couple of minutes. So you really want to make sure that those minutes are leaving the best possible impression that you could have. Um, and basically, that was our take home message from the bad resume example. So now we're going to go into, I don't know if you can do this on the slides or not. Like I said, I can't see really anything on my end because of my Zoom lagging. But this should be the slide where it says, what do employers look for? If you wanted to take that. Yeah, go ahead.
So employers are always going to look for what is going to make the person applying for the job most qualified for their job. So your experience is going to be something that is pretty vital to your application. What are the things that make you a good fit for the job? Like I said, your experience, your skills, and your competency. You don't want to apply for a coding job if you don't know how to code. You should learn how to code before you apply for the coding job, and then show on your resume that you have a certification in it or something like that. They want to make sure that they are hiring the most, like the person with the most qualifications for the job. And then you have your educational background, which is where you went to school and how you did in school. So sometimes, not always, where you went to school can be a large indicator of how, like, what subject is really difficult in said school. So if you went to a school that was really known for coding and things like that, and you put that on your application and you're applying for a coding job, that could be really good for you. So including that would be a really good idea. And how you did in school academically. A lot of employers equate work ethic with like how you did in school. So including if you did really well in school academically, put that in there. And then your personality. So they don't just want somebody who can do the job, they want somebody who can do the job well, and they want somebody that can be a good worker and work with others well. So your experiences are going to shape your personality, and they want you to have a personality. So making that shine through in your resume is a really good idea as well.
Absolutely. So the next thing we're going to go into is maybe some of you have started on a resume, maybe you haven't. So this is going to just kind of apply broadly to everyone, right? Um, so basically, you might be asking yourself at this point, so how do I get started, right? And the first thing to start off with is a plan. And what I mean by a plan is that you want to, list off the things that you want to really highlight about yourself. And also, obviously, all of the things that you've done. And in terms of how to do that effectively, what I recommend is I think, especially since a lot of you are still in high school, this is a really good skill to carry on through college, since you're going to be even more involved in college. Um, Hopefully, right? That's the goal. Um, you really want to try to, in whatever way works for you, keep track of the things that you do. So for me personally, what I do is I have, if any of you are familiar maybe with Microsoft OneNote, I really like to use that. It came with just like the Office like package that my university had, so it was completely free to me. And basically what it is you can, open it, have different tabs and stuff like that. And it's really just a good place to organize your notes, but also to maybe keep track of, your extracurriculars and stuff like that. So what I do is for every experience that I have, whether that's like volunteer or maybe leadership or something like that, is I list off maybe my title or my role in that position, right? And just like how you would have it on a resume, I list off a couple of things that I've accomplished, maybe a couple of stories that I can draw back on if someone asked me to elaborate about it. And I also put any sort of tangibles. So what are tangibles? Tangibles are how many hours I've been, committing to that. Have I won any awards? Have I been recognized in any way? Have I maybe improved efficiency by a certain amount or something like that? And so those are all just very good things to keep track of. And as you find you are more and more involved in other things as you, progress through your academic journey, it's going to be really important to keep all of that stuff organized because honestly, you're not going to remember. As much as you think you're going to remember how many hours you put into something freshman year, you're not going to remember. And when the time comes to put it on your resume and people are going to ask you about it, you want to give an educated response and an informed response. So that's what I mean by a plan. And then after you have a plan, you want to organize it. So like we talked about, and Haley talked about a lot of the different sections, right? What you want to do is you want to basically sort all of those different things that we talked about, right, into those categories. So if it's something like an academic recognition, maybe, for example, and let's say you're running low on space on your resume, you could maybe put that academic recognition, like a scholarship or maybe getting into like an honors program or something like that. You could just go ahead and put that as maybe like a bullet point under your education instead of maybe doing a separate section. So a lot of this is about playing it kind of by ear and by seeing how much of basically each category you have and what you can kind of combine if necessary. So that's what I basically mean by summarizing and organizing it. Then you want to enter rough draft mode. So as good and as hard as you work at it, the first draft is always going to be changed pretty much. So do your best, give it, a good go, organize all this stuff. Like we said, plan it out. But at the end of the day, you're still going to want to have someone look at it or if you are in college or you're a senior and you're going to be in college very soon, um, a lot of universities and stuff like that do have those kinds of resume workshops or programs. And at least I can speak for my university, right? So what we have is we have a career center. So you should make sure to check that out as soon as you get on campus. And you should just go there. And a lot of times they have one-on-one, basically advising on how to improve your resume. This also, again, depends on the college or university, but some of them also have this program called VMOC, and it's basically just a software. You'll upload your resume into it, And I wouldn't recommend paying for it or anything. If it's not included at your college, you're not missing out. It's just another helpful, basically, tool to have if it's offered to you. But basically what you do is you would upload your resume onto that. It'll give you some feedback, maybe flag a couple of things to change, and then you can go ahead and do that automatically. And it's just like AI instead of a person, right? Just telling you you need to fix this and fix that. And then, like I said, so the last big point that we're really trying to drive home is just like when you were writing any of your sort of application materials, like your essays, you really, really, really want to have someone else look at it. And while a lot of times people advise having your friends look at it, I would also err on the side of trying to have someone that's a little bit more professional try to look at it, like a teacher or a counselor or a trusted professor or something like that. Just because while your friends are, a great resource for catching those kinds of like maybe small resume errors and stuff like that, they're also learning with you at the same time. So they might not be able to catch something that maybe a more skilled person that has more experience might. So I think it's a good place to start if you're really lost on how to maybe set things up, is to talk to a friend. But that shouldn't be the only person that you talk to, because they're also probably not going to be as critical of you as someone, that's higher up might be, right? So your friends love you, they care about you, they don't want to hurt your feelings. But for things like this, they really need to kind of tell you the truth to your face for you to be able to actually improve. So basically that's the take home from that. So I'm going to look at the chat really quick because I saw a couple of things pop up in there while I was talking. So one of the things was, do you have any suggestions on how to make personality shine through? And can we email you our rough draft? Is that a possibility? Yes, you can email the rough draft. I'm going to put the email address to send it to in the chat for everybody. And just a quick clarification, it's going to be General Intelligences with an S. So a lot of people forget about that S. You need the S, otherwise it doesn't come to us. So don't send another email asking about, why we didn't get back. You need the S. But basically for suggestions on how to make personality shine through, there's a lot of ways actually to be kind of creative with your resume. So Haley sent in those templates, right? But you can also adapt. You can make Canva. I'm going to put that in the chat too. Has a lot of different, templates basically that you can use. So I think that that's another good option if maybe you're not sure of how to format it in a creative way that you might like. Yeah, so I would start with that for sure. And then let's see what else to make personality shine through. Haley, do you have any suggestions?
When you're typing about your experiences and the things that you've done, especially if you're in high school for extracurricular wise, make your extracurriculars that you showcase count. Make them be things that show who you really are. So I was really involved in Knowledge Bowl throughout my entire time in high school. It was my favorite thing in the whole planet. I was also in National Honor Society that I didn't actually do that much for. I would choose to put Knowledge Bowl on the resume because that is who I am, versus, sure, I fit the qualifications for National Honor Society, but it doesn't actually show who I am because I didn't do that much for it. So making sure that what you showcase on your resume shows who you are.
Okay, yes, we can definitely resend them. There you go. That should be it. If you have trouble when you do click the link, you can also let us know. Maybe there's an issue with the link or something like that, and then we can fix it. But another thing to address, since I just got this as a question, is any suggestions for people going maybe into the workforce for the first time? So kind of to start out with, I think that the number one thing to touch upon that you probably won't hear or see immediately when you just go to Google resume tips or stuff like that online is we briefly talked about keywords, right? So I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on that point because I think that it's a very big point that maybe a lot of people don't know about, right? Because it's not necessarily taught. So keywords are basically going to just be words that you'll find in the job description online. So for any job, internship, work, stuff like that, they're all going to have a description of basically the duties, maybe the preferred experience or stuff like that for the people that they are looking to employ. So for instance, let's say it's a tech job or something like that. They'll have a description and they'll say, our ideal applicant or our ideal, hiree or whatever it is, would have X amount of experience in back end development or front end development or something like that. They're going to be specific and they're going to say, we want to see maybe this many hours or this much dedication to this cause or this skill. And you really want to use what they have written in that job description and change your resume for each job that you apply to so that it has those words in there. Because a lot of times, like we said, these people are only spending a couple of minutes maximum checking out your application. And then at that point, they're just deciding between whether they will interview you, whether they will just outright reject you, or whether you're a maybe. So you want to do your best, especially if you're going to maybe be a maybe, to be into that interview pile. And that's one of the best ways to do that because they're just human. They're going to glance over your resume. They're going to see those key words highlighted, like, for example, maybe empathy or maybe collaboration or something like that, that they really emphasize or that they really wanted to see. And as long as they see those words, those like bells in their head are going off saying, this is a person that meets the qualifications that we are looking for. So let's give them a chance and see what they have. So I would say that that's maybe the number one thing that you want to look at. I don't know, Haley, if you have any other advice for maybe someone that is trying to find, a job for the first time or go back after maybe a while of not having a job.
A lot of people think that the experience that they have is not relevant, but you can definitely shape any experience that you have to fit a certain job, I think, personally. You are going to learn so much from even an extracurricular experience that you had, especially if you held leadership positions in that. So if you're fresh out of high school and you have never had a job, that's okay. As long as you've done something, as long as you've done anything, really, you have experience that you don't even recognize that you have, which I think we will get into a little bit more near the end of the webinar. But yeah, for sure. You have experiences that you don't even know you have when you think about it, and you can twist pretty much anything to fit whatever job you're applying to.
Absolutely. So I think that that was a really good point. So the next thing we're going to go into is someone asked about maybe what clubs or stuff like that to do that would look good on a resume, or whether you should just do stuff that you're passionate about. I would argue that you can probably accomplish both in the same go, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. It's something that you really care about and passionate about rather, or something that you have to do because you have to do it. So while there are a lot of, there is a lot of wiggle room, I would say, in terms of things that you can do. It also depends a lot on your field, right? So my resume is going to look a lot different from someone that's, going into marketing or something like that. But I think for the most part, as long as you kind of check off those boxes for whatever career you're going into, and there's a way to find obviously those boxes. I'll elaborate on that in a sec. But as long as you check off those boxes, like Haley said, I feel like you can tie back the other things that you've done into kind of the field that you want to go into. So they don't necessarily have to start off by, I don't know, I did like photography club or something like that. It doesn't necessarily strike you as something that's relevant to really any career except for maybe art, right? But you can tie in those experiences to a lot of different fields. You just have to think about it for a little bit. Okay, so another thing is, should we include the number of AP classes that we took, or that you are all, pre-AP or AP students, or is that something that you don't want to put in your resume? You can add relevant coursework. I think it does depend on the position that you're applying for. I would say relevant coursework works a little better on your LinkedIn rather than on your resume. And oh, that's another good thing to add, actually. It's a pretty good segue. I think that you should definitely make a LinkedIn. That's first and foremost. People are going to Google you. That's just the time that we live in. And they're obviously going to want to see what you've been up to and whether that kind of matches what you've put on your resume. Anyone can go ahead and write anything that they want on the resume, but it would be nice to have something that kind of backs it up pretty immediately, right? So you definitely want to make a LinkedIn. And what you can do is at the very top of your resume is you'll just add basically just the link, the URL to your LinkedIn. And if it's a e-resume or something like that, and you're just applying for like a remote position, maybe you can even be fancy and put in like a QR code or something like that. But yeah, so I definitely think that you should add your LinkedIn on there. And then I think that would be the place to have the coursework. Although, if, for example, you are a high school student, and high school students usually don't have that much experience outside of school anyway, I think that it would be okay to talk about your relevant coursework in that occasion. I think once you actually are in college and stuff like that, you'll find that your list of relevant coursework really grows a lot because your entire major, right, is the coursework for getting that career, a job in that career, right? So all of that coursework, yes, it's great. It's just like cherry on top. It would be nice to have if you have room. If you don't worry about it. But yeah, so I think we'll just go to the last slide really quick with the how do I know that my resume is good? And then we will answer the rest of the questions. If you want to just go through that slide really quick.
So this is kind of like what she was saying earlier, but the first step would have your peers review it. So like we said, they're kind of going to be a little bit less harsh. Your friends love you and they want you to feel the love that they have. And so I'm sure that your resume isn't bad, but there's always things that can be improved. And sometimes friends don't know how to tell you that specifically and nicely. So they just say that it's great, which it is great, but it can always be improved. So the second step, like she was saying already, was to look for the career centers at a college or your university, because those things exist at some universities, not all, but some. They will help you as well with your resume, and they have a lot of experience doing it because it's kind of their job. Then you can ask either a professor or a teacher to look over it. That's kind of the next step. Your professors or your teachers are going to be more harsh than your peers, like we talked about, because your peers are your friends. Typically, they don't want to let you down, versus a professor is usually more professional and they will tell you how it is. And then on LinkedIn, like we were just talking about, you can try to trade resumes with other people, see if you can bounce ideas off of each other, find different things to do, and improve upon your resume. I don't know if you want to expand upon that a little bit more, or.
Yeah, so I think you pretty much covered it, but I think also just in general, um, kind of like we touched on already, LinkedIn is good because people are going to be able to see all of the stuff that you're working on. It's also good because you can elaborate in way more detail than you could on a resume. Whether or not people read all of that, I think it kind of depends on the person and how interested they are in really getting to know more about you. But it's still a good place to elaborate on kind of your skills, your certifications. There's just a complete section just for certifications. So it's really a great place to, list off all of the stuff that you've been working on, maybe in your free time or stuff like that. But yeah, so now we will just go into any questions that any of you have. So I know we kind of already started on that, but we will just continue. Okay, first thing is someone asked about writing cover letters. So we can definitely talk about that. So basically what a cover letter is for those of you that may not know, a cover letter could be whether it's like a physical attachment or just the email that you send when attaching your resume. It could be either of those two things, but it basically just includes the following things. So it includes a little bit about you, not a lot of detail, just a little bit. Maybe your major, your career path, whatever, where you go to school, and stuff like that in terms of you. And then after that, you want to immediately go into talking about the job position and the company or the people you are going to be, um, talking to or collaborating with. So basically, for example, if you wanted to say, this is just an example, if you wanted to say, like, apply for a position at Google, it's a good example, right? So what you would do is obviously you have your resume. You ideally went, you had your friends look at it, you had your trusted professor look at it, you had people on LinkedIn give it a look, maybe even some recruiters give it a look. And now you feel like, okay, I'm ready to apply for this position. I have the experience necessary. So what you do, you go ahead and, look at the job description. It's going to tell you who you need to get in contact with to send those materials, right? So once you have that information, you're gonna, get started on that email. That cover letter is going to, like I said, include a little bit about you, and then it's gonna really start to focus on that company. So some things you could talk about are company culture. So you could say like, I really want to work at Google because I appreciate how creativity is fostered or something like that. Like, for example, I think Google is a good example for this because, they do have that very creative atmosphere where it's kind of a little bit laid back. It's not just like a regular 9 to 5 job. You can bike to your meetings, you have like slides and like buffets and stuff like that. So like it is, a good experience. You don't want to just, be hyping them up without any substance. It can just be about something that you really find interesting or good about that company. You don't want to just bring up something that maybe is not necessarily true, because they will just look at it and be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Um, After you do that, you want to really emphasize why you want to do that position, why that position specifically and not something else. So a lot of times when people or companies are recruiting, they'll be recruiting for a bunch of positions all at once. They usually don't do it one-to-one, right? So you want to really show that you are, qualified and stuff like that to do that role and why you want to do that role specifically and would not be comfortable in another role. So that's another thing you want to touch on. And then the other thing that you want to touch on after that is, let's see. Yeah, okay, so after you've already touched on both of those two things, you want to talk about why you would be an asset. Basically, kind of just advocate for yourself a little bit. Like, I have X experience in this field doing these things, and I think that that would be, a perspective that would be good to introduce at your company, or it would be a skill that I think would, make your company more efficient in this way, or something like that. And then obviously you always want to conclude in a nice way, let them know that you're, really looking forward to hearing a positive response. And you also maybe want to also let them know that, hey, they can check out maybe your portfolio at like this site, or some people have, their own like personal websites that they make as like their resumes. You could link that there too. It's a little extra. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it's just another thing that you could do. And if not, again, you could just direct them back to your like LinkedIn and let them know that you're really looking forward to, hearing more about the position. So that would be what you put in a cover letter. Haley, if there's anything like maybe that I missed or something. Okay, I thought that was pretty thorough, but I just wanted to make sure. um, okay. So someone asked, someone asked if we're YouTubers. So no, we're not YouTubers. I will put this up on YouTube, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a YouTuber. We just record all of our sessions and just for convenience and stuff. At the beginning, we started off by just sending out the links to people one-on-one. That's pretty hectic. We get a lot of emails. We decided it would just be better to have it, in a centralized place that people can access. You can also find it on our website. Let's see. Next question. Should we describe our personality in our resume? I think you could describe it if it was maybe relevant to the particular role you were going for. Like, for example, maybe if you were applying for like something in like healthcare, I think like one of the big things that a lot of people, are looking for when hiring someone for that field would be empathy or being, really kind and helpful and stuff like that. I don't think it should be a separate section by any means where you just go about describing like your character strengths or something like that. But you can incorporate that, like we said, into the other sections. So that would be my advice.
A lot of your skills are going to overlap with your personality. So your bedside manner and things like that. If you are I'm trying to think of an example. If you are empathetic and kind, being empathetic is a skill. Saying that you have a strong sense of empathy is a skill, especially when you're considering different job titles like healthcare and things like that. You can definitely put that in the skill section, and that in itself is showing off your personality.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Okay, so the next question that we have is can we add a picture to our resume? Okay, I've seen some resumes with photos, I've seen some without. I kind of think it a little bit depends. I would say probably don't put it on your resume. I think some people are very like strongly against it. I would say the way that things are moving towards would be more so that people are asking for pictures now more than probably ever before. I know, like, for example, like when applying to medical school, you have to submit a headshot. And I think that, while you don't necessarily want to have it on your resume, you should try to have those kinds of like professional looking photos in some shape or form for your LinkedIn, for if they ask for a headshot, stuff like that. I wouldn't know about necessarily putting it on a resume, though, at least not now. Unless they specifically ask for it, I would say don't do that. But yeah, so does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns? Oh, okay. I think someone raised their hand, but then they put it back down. So now I don't know who it is. You can put it back up. It's fine. Or maybe it was an accident. If it was an accident, then that's okay too. Zoom is weird. Okay. So it looks like we don't have any other questions, which is totally fine. We went through kind of a lot of content in a, relatively short amount of time. But like me and Haley were talking about and stuff like that, we're really here for you. If you do have, any like follow-up questions or stuff like that, you can absolutely email us. We put the email in the chat already, but just in case maybe you had like some connectivity issues. I know that as soon as Zoom drops, basically everything drops and you can't see the chat anymore. So I'll just put it in one more time for everybody. And also, just to kind of reiterate, we do a lot of workshops just in general on other topics relating to college and stuff like that. So, and we will be doing more with, basically like college apps and things like that in coming months. So definitely, stay in touch and come to those as well. Thank you, everyone.